Hello everyone, welcome to History and Culture. When it comes to Wu Zetian, everyone knows that she was the only female emperor in Chinese history. Her iron-fisted methods instilled fear in many who opposed her. And the brutal punishments invented by the cruel officials under her command were enough to make people shudder. Here, we will discuss the 7 most ruthless punishments during Wu Zetian's reign. Why did Wu Zetian favor these ruthless officials? And what unknown secrets lie behind these punishments? The first punishment, Jade Maiden ascending the ladder. This name might sound like it involves climbing a ladder, but in reality, it was an extremely brutal punishment. During execution, the enforcers would set up a single plank bridge with sharp bamboo stakes or wooden spikes underneath. Ladders were placed at both ends, forcing the prisoner to climb up. The prisoner had to remove all clothing and was shackled with heavy iron chains on both hands and feet, with a rope tied around their neck. The other end of the rope was controlled by the executioners. Under the enforcers' coercion, the prisoner was forced to climb the ladder. Due to the weight of the chains, every step was unsteady, and any misstep could lead to a deadly fall. Once the prisoner finally reached the narrow single-plank bridge, the ladders were removed, leaving them to walk precariously along the bridge. Typically, 2 prisoners were made to stand on the bridge simultaneously, forced to walk toward each other. The instability of the bridge, combined with the constraints of the shackles and the interference from one another, made their steps wobbly, as if they were performing a dangerous aerial dance. This eerie sight is what gave the punishment its poetic yet horrifying name, Jade Maiden ascending the ladder. Even those with excellent balance had little chance of survival, as the executioners could pull the rope at any moment, causing the prisoners to fall. This punishment was not only physically torturous but also extremely humiliating, leading many prisoners to prefer suicide over enduring such an ordeal. The second punishment, swinging bed. Hearing the name, swinging bed, one might think it refers to a place for rest. But the reality was entirely different. The key to this punishment lay in the word, swinging, making it impossible for the prisoner to lie still. Executioners would suspend 4 ropes from the ceiling, tying the prisoner's hands and feet so they were stretched out in midair in a large X shape, similar to a swinging pendulum. However, this movement was far from gentle. Instead, it was a source of immense suffering. With all 4 limbs suspended, the prisoner had no way to support themselves. Over time, their body weight would strain their joints, causing excruciating pain and even dislocations. Additionally, the prisoner's head would remain lowered for extended periods, leading to blood rushing to the brain and intense discomfort. What made this punishment even more unbearable was that once the prisoner was tied up, they would not be released easily. Basic needs like eating and relieving themselves had to be handled while they remained suspended. Food was not carefully fed to them but rather shoved into their mouths. And even something as simple as porridge might be forcibly poured down their throat. To maintain cleanliness, executioners would place wooden buckets beneath the prisoners to collect their waste. For male prisoners, this punishment was already agonizing. For female prisoners, it was an even greater physical and psychological torment. As a result, the swinging bed became a terrifying taboo among prisoners. Just hearing its name was enough to strike fear into their hearts. The third form of punishment is the immortal's gift. This name might sound like a divine blessing, but in reality, it was an excruciating form of torture. Also known as the immortal offering fruit, the punishment was named after the posture of the victim, which resembled someone presenting a gift with both hands. During the execution, the ground would be covered with sharp broken tiles or stones, and the victim was forced to kneel on them while holding a tray with both hands. The tray had to remain steady and could not be dropped. As the interrogation continued, the executioners would gradually increase the weight placed on the tray, testing the victim's endurance and pain tolerance. The kneecaps, being bony and sensitive, would suffer extreme discomfort from prolonged pressure on the hard, jagged surface. As the weight on the tray increased, every second became unbearable. Yet, no matter how agonizing it was, the victim dared not lower the tray, because if it tilted or fell, they would face even harsher punishment. When the victim could no longer endure it and their hands eventually gave out, their knees, already severely tormented, would struggle to support their weight. And their arms might be so strained that they became dislocated or numb. This punishment was not just a test of physical endurance but also an immense psychological torment. The fourth punishment is phoenix spreading its wings. The name sounds elegant, even reminiscent of a graceful dance in ancient palaces, but in reality, it was a brutal test of physical limits. For this punishment, the executioners would bind the victim to a frame similar to a crucifix, with their arms fully extended and fixed in place. Then, by rotating the frame, they would force the victim's upper body to twist unnaturally. As the frame spun, the victim's arms would be stretched and twisted, causing excruciating pain. If the rotation was too extreme, it could result in joint dislocation or even cause the upper body to be contorted as if twisted into a rope. This method was designed to apply sustained pressure, forcing the victim to surrender. Executioners were often careful to control the intensity, making the victim suffer unbearable pain without immediately taking their life. The fifth punishment is, the land duck learns to swim. At first glance, this might sound like a punishment involving water, forcing a non-swimmer to struggle in a pool. However, it had almost nothing to do with water, it was an entirely different kind of torment. This punishment was carried out in 4 steps. The victim was tied to a fixed torture device, either seated or lying down, with their shoes and socks removed. The executioner would then take a special pig bristle brush and scrub the soles of the victim's feet back and forth. Since the soles of the feet are highly sensitive, the victim would be unable to resist laughing hysterically, squirming uncontrollably. The more they struggled, the faster the brushing continued, eventually causing the skin to turn red, without them even realizing it. If the victim still refused to confess, the torture escalated. The bristle brush would be replaced with a steel wire brush. This brush was rough and rigid, creating an unbearable mix of tickling and sharp pain. The victim's body would tremble involuntarily from the torment. However, some people had thick calluses on their feet, making them more resistant to the pain. In such cases, the torture moved to the next level. The victim's feet would be soaked in boiling water to soften the skin, and once the calluses had weakened, the scrubbing with the steel brush would resume. At this point, the initial tickling sensation turned into searing pain, making it almost impossible for the victim to hold out any longer. If they still refused to confess or plead guilty, then the final method would be used, soaking their feet in vinegar and chilly water. This intense stimulation would cause their entire body to go numb, sweat to pour down like rain, and even uncontrollable trembling. However, since their hands and feet were tightly bound, their struggles were limited, making them appear like a duck flapping helplessly on land. This is why the punishment was called a drowning duck learning to swim. The sixth punishment was called hanging and adding weight. The name itself is quite straightforward. It was essentially an upgraded version of hanging by the hair. In ancient times, people generally kept long hair, as it was believed that the body and hair were gifts from one's parents and should not be harmed. However, this very belief became a tool for torment. The punishment known as suspended with a weight took advantage of this custom. The executioner would suspend the prisoner upside down from a beam, but the key was that they would tie a heavy object to the prisoner's hair, letting it gradually pull downward. Over time, this could cause anything from a numbing scalp and massive hair loss, to excruciating pain and even blood congestion in the head, leaving the victim disoriented and on the verge of collapse. What if the prisoner had short hair or none at all? A different method would be used, hanging them upside down over a brazier, allowing the rising heat and smoke from the burning charcoal to slowly scorch them, until they could no longer endure the torment. This method was not only agonizing but also mentally torturous, as few could withstand it for long. The seventh punishment was called bone drunkenness. This cruel punishment seemed to have been inspired by the infamous human swine torture inflicted by Empress Lu of the Han dynasty. After Emperor Liu Bang passed away, Empress Lu took extreme revenge on Consort Qi. She not only crippled Consort Qi, but also took away her hearing, sight, and ability to speak, before locking her in a pigsty, reducing her to a state that was neither human nor beast. A fate that was unimaginably tragic. Empress Wu Zetian employed a similar method when dealing with Consort Xiao and Empress Huang. She first subjected them to severe punishment, causing immense suffering. Then, their limbs were disabled, and their senses were stripped away, leaving them unable to live like normal human beings. Yet, the true horror of bone intoxication was far worse. As the name suggests, the key to this punishment was intoxication. Wu Zetian had the victims placed into large vats filled with strong liquor, completely submerging their bodies. The alcohol would seep through their skin, causing an unbearable burning sensation, a pain far more excruciating than any external wound. Moreover, the vats were extremely small, leaving the victims unable to move or even cry out. They could do nothing but suffer in utter despair. The punishment known as bone drunkenness was mentioned in both official and unofficial historical records. But whether it actually took place remains a subject of debate. Why did Wu Zetian favor officials known for harsh punishments? Simply put, it was to establish her authority. Wu Zetian entered the palace at the age of 14 as a concubine of Emperor Taizong of Tang and remained there for 12 years. She never bore him a child and, due to certain rumors, once found herself in a precarious situation. Her time in the palace was far from easy, filled with loneliness and helplessness. Some speculate that Emperor Taizong allowed her into the palace as a way to honor her father. Outwardly, she was a concubine, but in reality, she was treated more like an adopted daughter. After Emperor Taizong's death, Wu Zetian was sent to Ganya Temple to become a nun, following palace tradition. At that point, her political career seemed to have reached a dead end. However, fate had other plans. When Emperor Gaozong ascended the throne, fierce struggles erupted in the imperial harem. Empress Huang, who had no children, found herself at a disadvantage against Consort Xiao. In an attempt to strengthen her position, she decided to bring Wu Zetian back to the palace for support. Unexpectedly, this decision paved the way for Wu Zetian to claim the throne for herself, ultimately leading to Empress Huang's downfall. Upon returning to the palace, Wu Zetian displayed extraordinary political acumen. She first allied with Empress Huang to suppress Consort Xiao, then skillfully maneuvered herself into Emperor Gaozong's favor, surpassing both of them. Just 4 years later, Wu Zetian completely seized control of the imperial court. Empress Huang, Consort Xiao, and their supporters were all eliminated. Even the powerful Chancellor Changsun Wuji was forced to commit suicide under mounting pressure. With her political enemies vanquished, Wu Zetian's power grew stronger than ever. Wu Zetian and Emperor Gaozong developed a symbiotic relationship. She sought real authority, while he admired her capabilities. Their cooperation was so seamless that to the outside world, Emperor Gaozong appeared to be merely relaying her orders. From then on, Wu Zetian actively participated in state affairs, even making decisions from behind a curtain, effectively ruling alongside her husband. Despite having 4 sons, none of them proved helpful in her pursuit of power. In fact, they often complicated matters. Historical records suggest that she may have played a role in the deaths of her eldest son, Li Hong, and second son, Li Xian. However, some accounts claim Li Hong died of illness, while others speculate that Li Xian was not her biological son. These historical mysteries remain unresolved to this day. In 683 AD, Emperor Gaozong passed away. On his deathbed, he specifically instructed that all state affairs should be decided by Wu Zetian. However, when their son, Li Xian, ascended the throne, he attempted to appoint his father-in-law as chancellor. This move quickly led to his deposition by Wu Zetian. Her youngest son, Li Dan, was then placed on the throne. Unlike his brother, Li Dan chose to keep a low profile and refrained from interfering in politics. As a result, all imperial power fell into Wu Zetian's hands. For the next 21 years, she ruled as the de facto sovereign, eventually declaring herself the first, and only, female emperor in Chinese history. From another perspective, Li Dan's strategy was rather wise. It allowed him to survive while still retaining his imperial status. During these 21 years, opposition against Wu Zetian never ceased. Rebellions arose, such as Su Jingye's uprising in Yangzhou and the joint resistance led by Prince Li Chong of Lengjia and Prince Li Zhen of Yu in Guozhou and Yuzhou. Although these uprisings were ultimately crushed, dissatisfaction with Wu Zetian's rule persisted. To counter these threats, Wu Zetian adopted a unique approach. She appointed officials known for their ruthless methods, tasking them with suppressing dissent. These officials, eager to gain her favor, devised increasingly brutal punishments to showcase their effectiveness. Under their rule, a series of fearsome and draconian punishments emerged, leading to countless cases of injustice and suffering. In addition, Wu Zetian implemented a special, informant system, where many people were implicated regardless of whether they were truly guilty. Once sent to the specially designated imperial prison, almost no one emerged unscathed. This high-pressure tactic effectively helped Wu Zetian eliminate many of her opponents while also redirecting public resentment toward the officials carrying out her orders, temporarily alleviating hostility toward her personally. However, these methods also had negative consequences. The officials who relied on Wu Zetian's authority became increasingly reckless, leading to the wrongful persecution of many innocent people. Both the court and the general public were gripped by fear. Even some ministers who had initially supported Wu Zetian began submitting petitions, pleading with her to put an end to the excessive use of harsh punishments. Later, as Wu Zetian's imperial power became more secure, she began to adjust her approach. When the time was right, she swiftly purged the officials who had once been loyal to her but had acted too ruthlessly, such as Zhou Xing and Lai Junchen, who were subsequently punished. She also ordered the redress of many wrongful convictions, including cases involving those she had previously suppressed, such as Empress Huang. Some believe that these actions were an attempt by Wu Zetian to rehabilitate her image. However, in hindsight, her policy adjustments indeed laid the foundation for the prosperity that followed in the Tang dynasty. This is the History and Culture channel. Liking and subscribing are the greatest help and support to us. Thank you everyone and see you in the next time.